The station floated in the darkness like a dead thing. It had no lights, no signals, nothing to show it was anything more than metal and dust. But the Harmony had picked up a faint signal from deep inside, and that was enough reason to investigate. Kang Do-yun stood at the airlock with his tool bag over his shoulder. He was 34 years old, with tired eyes and hands that knew machines better than people. The Coalition had assigned him to the survey ship 6 months ago, and he had spent most of that time fixing things that broke. That was his job. That was his life. Find the problem, solve the problem, move on to the next one. Gamma 7, the captain said over the comm, abandoned 60 years ago. No records say why. Your job is to check if the power systems can be restored. We want to know if this place is worth salvaging. Do-yun nodded even though the captain could not see him. He stepped through the airlock and into the station. The air was cold and stale. Emergency lights flickered in weak yellow, barely enough to see by. The walls were covered in strange symbols that no human had ever translated. The species that built this place was gone now, wiped out in some war that happened before humans ever left their home planet. All that remained were places like this, empty, forgotten, full of secrets nobody would ever understand. Do-hyun walked through the corridors alone. The rest of the crew spread out to different sections. 12 people to explore a station meant for hundreds. It would take days to search everything, but they only needed the basics: power, atmosphere, structural integrity. Everything else was someone else's problem. He found the main engineering bay after 20 minutes of walking. The machines here were alien, but machines followed rules. Power flowed in certain ways. Systems connected in patterns that made sense if you looked hard enough. Do-hyun set down his bag and got to work. 3 levels up, Park Yuna walked through what looked like a medical bay. She was 29, with short black hair and the calm expression of someone who had seen too many emergencies to panic at anything. The Coalition had trained her as a field medic, which meant she knew how to keep people alive in bad situations. She hoped this would not become a bad situation. The medical bay was full of equipment she did not recognize, beds that floated without supports, containers filled with liquids that glowed faint blue. She recorded everything with her scanner and tried not to touch anything that looked dangerous. Her communicator buzzed. "Yuna, you finding anything useful up there?" It was Do-yun. They had worked together for 3 months now, long enough to become something like friends. He was quiet and serious, but he listened when she talked, which was more than she could say for most people. "Strange things," she replied. "Medical tools, I think. Hard to tell. You? The power grid is a mess. Whoever left this place did it in a hurry. Half the systems are burned out. I can maybe get basic power running, but it will take time." "How much time?" "Few hours, maybe more." Yuna nodded to herself. A few hours was fine. They had supplies. They had time. Nothing was trying to kill them. That thought lasted exactly 4 more minutes. The Harmony shuddered. Yuna felt it through the deck plates, a deep vibration that ran through the whole station. She grabbed a console to steady herself and looked out the nearest viewport. The survey ship was pulling away from the docking port. "What the?" She hit her communicator. "Captain? Captain, what's happening? Why are you undocking?" No response. Just static. The Harmony turned slowly in the darkness, its engines glowing blue. Then it jumped. One moment it was there, and the next moment it was gone, leaving nothing but empty space and distant stars. Yuna stared at the viewport for a long moment. Her heart was beating very fast, but her hands were steady. Panic would not help. Panic never helped. "Do-yun," she said into her communicator. "Do-yun, tell me you saw that." "I saw it." His voice was flat, controlled. "I'm coming to you. Don't move." She waited in the medical bay, watching the darkness outside. The station seemed bigger now and emptier, and much more dangerous than it had been 5 minutes ago. She was stranded, They were all stranded. 12 people on a dead station with no ship and no way to call for help. Do-yun arrived 10 minutes later. He was breathing hard like he had been running. "The others," he said. "Have you heard from the others?" "No. Comms are dead. Just static." He nodded, his jaw tight. "We need to find them. Regroup. Figure out what happened." They moved through the station together, calling out names that echoed back unanswered. The emergency lights flickered and buzzed. Shadows pooled in corners like dark water. Every corridor looked the same, endless metal and alien symbols that meant nothing. They found the first body near the central hub. It was Kim Ji-soo, one of the security officers. She was lying face down in a pool of blood, her weapon still in its holster. The wound in her back was clean and precise. A weapon had done this, not an accident, not the station. A weapon held by someone who knew how to kill. Yuna knelt beside the body and checked for a pulse she knew she would not find. Do-yun stood guard, his eyes scanning the corridor. His hands were shaking now, just a little. They found 2 more bodies in the next room. Park Hyun and Lee Soo-jin, both from the science team. Same wounds, same precise shots. Someone had hunted them down and killed them without a fight. "The ship didn't leave because of an emergency," Do-yun said quietly. "Someone made it leave, or took control of it. And then they started killing the crew." "Who?" Yuna asked. "Who would do this?" The answer came from the viewport. A ship was approaching the station. It was black and angular, covered in spines and sensor arrays that looked like insect eyes. Do-yun recognized the design from old war reports. Everyone did. Veth, scavengers, raiders. They found abandoned places and stripped them of everything valuable. Technology, resources, people if the price was right. They did not leave witnesses. Witnesses complicated things. The ship locked onto the secondary docking port with a clang that echoed through the station. "How many?" Yuna asked. "Standard raider crew is 20 to 30. Do-yun's voice was hollow. "Armed. Armored. They'll sweep the station level by level and kill everything they find." Yuna looked at him. He looked at her. Neither of them had weapons. Neither of them had a plan. "So we run," she said. "We run," he agreed. They ran. The maintenance tunnels were dark and narrow. Do-yun led the way, crawling through spaces that were never meant for humans. The original builders of this station had been smaller, with bodies that bent in ways human bodies could not. Every meter was a fight against sharp edges and low ceilings. Behind him, Yuna moved in silence. Her ankle was swelling badly from a fall 2 levels back, but she did not complain. Complaining would not help, only moving would help. Above them, through the metal floor of the main corridors, they could hear the Veth. The aliens moved in groups of 3. Their legs clicked against the deck plates in a rhythm that sounded almost musical. They spoke to each other in high-pitched sounds that human ears could barely hear, like whispers at the edge of a nightmare. Their exoskeletons scraped against walls as they searched every room, every corner, every shadow. Do-hyun stopped at a junction where 3 tunnels met. He pulled out his scanner and checked the station map he had downloaded earlier. Most of the data was corrupted, but he could see the basic layout. They were in the lower levels now, far from where the Veth had entered. "There's a sealed compartment ahead," he whispered. "Engineering workshop, I think. If we can get inside, we might be able to hide." "Might?" Yuna asked. "Better than definitely dying out here." She almost smiled. "Good point. Lead on." They crawled for another 20 minutes. Yuna's ankle got worse with every meter. By the time they reached the sealed door, she was biting her lip to keep from crying out. Do-yun noticed, but he said nothing. Saying something would not help. Getting inside would help. The door was locked with a code system that no human could read. But Do-yun was an engineer, and locks were just another kind of machine. He opened his tool bag and got to work. 5 minutes later, the door hissed open. The room inside was covered in 60 years of dust. Workbenches lined the walls, covered in tools and parts that had not been touched since before Do-Yun was born. In the center of the room stood a large machine that looked like a fabrication unit, the kind that could build almost anything if you gave it the right materials and blueprints. "This will do," Do-Yun said. They sealed the door behind them and pushed heavy equipment against it. It was not much of a barricade, but it would slow down anyone trying to get in. That was all they needed. Time. A little time to think. Yuna sat down on a dusty crate and started treating her ankle. The swelling was bad, but nothing was broken. She wrapped it tight with bandages from her medical kit and took a pain blocker that would keep her moving for the next few hours. "How long before they find us?" she asked. Do-Yun was already examining the fabrication unit. "Depends on how thorough they are. This station is big, lots of places to search. Maybe 6 hours, maybe less. And then?" He did not answer right away. His hands moved over the machine, testing connections, checking power levels. The fabricator was old but intact. The original builders had made things to last. "Then we die," he said finally. "Unless we find another option." "What kind of option?" Do-Yun pulled up the station's computer terminal and started searching through old files. Most of the data was corrupted or encrypted, but some records were still readable. He scrolled through documents in a language he could not understand, looking for anything useful. Then he found it. "This station wasn't just a research facility," he said slowly. "It was a military prototype development center. The species that built it was working on weapons, defensive systems, things to protect their colonies from attack." Yuna limped over to look at the screen. "Weapons? Are there any left?" "No. It looks like everything was removed when they abandoned the place, but—" He scrolled further. "They left the blueprints. They left the fabrication systems. They left everything you would need to build the weapons again if you had the knowledge and the time." "We don't have time." "We have 6 hours." Yuna stared at him. "You can't build weapons in 6 hours." "No," Do-Hyun agreed. "But I can build traps. I can build tools. I can take this station's systems and turn them into something the Veth won't expect." He looked around the workshop, his engineer's mind already working. "They think they're hunting 2 scared humans hiding in the dark. They're wrong. We're not hiding. We're preparing." For the first time since the nightmare began, Yuna felt something other than fear. It was small and fragile, but it was there. Hope. "What do you need?" she asked. "Parts, power cells, anything electronic, and I need you to get into that medical database." He pointed at another terminal across the room. "The Veth are organic. They have weaknesses, chemicals that affect their nervous systems, frequencies that disrupt their senses. Find me something I can use." Yuna nodded and moved to the medical terminal. Her ankle screamed with every step, but she ignored it. Pain was just information. Pain told you where the problems were. It did not stop you from working. Do-Yun started repairing the fabrication unit. The machine was damaged, but not destroyed. Some components had corroded over the decades, but he had spare parts in his bag. He had tools. He had skills that the Veth did not know about and could not prepare for. Hours passed. The station was silent except for the sound of work. Do-Yun built motion sensors from salvaged medical scanners. He constructed EMP grenades from capacitors he pulled out of broken light fixtures. He connected his personal data pad to the station's security network and began learning how to control doors, cameras, and atmospheric systems. Yuna found what she was looking for in the medical database. The Veth had vulnerabilities. Their respiratory systems were sensitive to certain chemical compounds. Their eyes could not adjust quickly to sudden changes in light. Their communication relied on ultrasonic frequencies that could be jammed or disrupted. She synthesized a compound that would disorient Veth for several minutes if inhaled. Not deadly, but enough to make them blind and confused. She figured out how to deliver it through the station's ventilation system. Outside the workshop, the Veth searched closer and closer. Their clicking footsteps echoed through corridors that were slowly becoming a trap. Finally, Do-hyun stood back from his work. The fabrication unit hummed with power. His datapad showed a map of the station with dozens of marked points where he had installed sensors or prepared surprises. He looked tired, but there was something new in his eyes, something cold and determined. "They're almost here," Yuna said, watching the security feeds. 20 minutes, maybe less." Do-hyun nodded. He gathered his tools and his datapad. "Then we should leave. Let them have this room. We'll watch from somewhere safe." And then? He smiled, and it was not a kind smile. "Then we show them what happens when they trap an engineer in a building full of machines." They slipped out through a ventilation shaft, just as the Veth began cutting through the barricaded door. Behind them, the workshop waited, empty and quiet. But it was not harmless anymore. Nothing on this station was harmless anymore. The hunt was about to change. 3 levels above the workshop, Do-hyun and Yuna sat in a small control room and watched their enemies walk into a trap. The security cameras showed everything. 6 Veth hunters entered the workshop, their weapons raised, their insect-like heads turning in quick jerks as they searched for prey. They found nothing. Just dust and empty workbenches and a fabrication unit that hummed quietly in the corner. The lead Veth made a clicking sound. Frustration, maybe. Or confusion. It was hard to tell with aliens. Do-hyun pressed a button on his datapad. The door sealed behind them. The lights went out, and the fabrication unit released a cloud of gas that Yuna had prepared 6 hours ago. On the camera, the Veth began to stumble. They dropped their weapons and grabbed at their faces. Their clicking became high and panicked, a sound like breaking glass. They could not see. They could not breathe properly. They crashed into walls and each other, blind and lost in the dark. Do-hyun opened a side door remotely. The Veth stumbled toward it, desperate for escape. They ran down a corridor that he had chosen specifically for this moment. Then he sealed that door too and vented the atmosphere. The Veth died in silence. There was no air to carry their screams. Yuna watched the screens without expression. Her hands were steady, but her heart was beating hard. She had never killed anyone before. These were enemies, yes. They would have killed her without a second thought. But watching them die still felt like crossing a line she could never uncross. 6 down, Do-hyun said quietly. Maybe 20 more to go. How do you feel? Yuna asked. He did not answer for a long moment. His eyes stayed on the screens, watching the dead bodies float in the airless corridor. I feel like an engineer solving a problem, he said finally. The Veth are the problem. This is the solution. That's not really an answer. It's the only answer I have right now. He stood up and gathered his datapad. We need to move. They'll figure out something is wrong soon. We need to be ready for the next group. They moved through the station like ghosts. Do-hyun knew every corridor now, every junction, every system that he could control from his datapad. He had spent hours mapping the station's networks and finding ways to turn innocent systems into weapons. The lighting system became a weapon. Veth eyes adjusted slowly to sudden brightness. Do-hyun set up sequences that would flash from complete darkness to blinding white in milliseconds, leaving any Veth in the area stunned and vulnerable. The atmospheric system became a weapon. He could flood sections with coolant from the reactor, dropping temperatures to levels that Veth could not survive. He could seal doors and remove air from any room he chose. The door controls became a weapon. Every corridor was a potential trap. Every room was a potential tomb. The station that had seemed so empty and dead was now alive with danger. The second hunting party found them an hour later, or thought they found them. Do-hyun had left traces for the Veth to follow, A heat signature here, a sound there. False trails that led the hunters deeper into sections he controlled completely. The aliens were confident. They moved fast, eager to catch their prey. They followed the trail into a cargo bay filled with old containers. The door sealed behind them. On a security screen 3 levels away, Do-Yun watched them realize their mistake. He did not use gas this time. He used gravity. The cargo bay had an emergency release system for loading and unloading heavy equipment. Do-Yun activated it and cut the artificial gravity at the same time. The Veth floated up, surprised and disoriented. Then he reversed the gravity and slammed them down against the deck with 3 times normal force. Bones cracked, exoskeletons shattered. 8 more Veth died in seconds. Yuna recorded everything on her medical scanner, not because she wanted to remember, but because the data might be useful. The more she understood about Veth physiology, the better she could hurt them. 14 down, she said. Maybe a dozen left. Their leader is smarter than the others, Do-Hyun replied. He pointed at one of the security feeds. A Veth larger than the rest stood in a corridor, studying a wall panel. This one moved differently, carefully. It was examining the station's systems, trying to understand what was happening to its hunters. The Collector, Yuna said. She had heard stories about Veth leaders who earned names. They were the worst ones, the ones who had survived long enough to learn and adapt. He's figuring it out, Do-Yun agreed. He knows someone is controlling the station. He just doesn't know how yet. Can you stop him? Not directly. He's being careful, staying in open areas, keeping his group tight. Do-Hyun frowned at his datapad. I need to be smarter, faster. I need to make him panic. An idea began to form in his mind. Not a trap this time, but a message. Something to break the Collector's confidence and turn his remaining hunters against each other. He accessed the station's communication system. It was old but functional. He could broadcast to any device in the station, including the communicators the Veth carried. Yuna, I need you to edit some video footage for me. She raised an eyebrow. Video? I've been recording everything, every trap, every death. I want to send it to them. He smiled, and it was cold and terrible. I want them to see what's coming for them. For the next 20 minutes, Yuna cut together footage from the security cameras. The first hunting party stumbling blind in the gas. The second group being crushed under artificial gravity. Body after body after body. Accompanied by the quiet hum of station systems that should have been harmless. Do-Yun added one final touch, a voice recording. Outpost Gamma 7 belongs to me now, he said into the microphone. His voice was calm and steady, almost friendly. Every door, every light, every breath of air. You are trapped here with me, and you will die here. Unless you leave. Now. Take your ship and go, and I will let you live. Stay, and I will add your bodies to my collection. He broadcast the message to every Veth communicator on the station. On the security feeds, they watched the Collector receive it. The alien leader stood very still as the footage played on his arm display. Around him, his remaining hunters shifted nervously. Their clicking sounds were quieter now. Scared. The Collector made a harsh, loud sound, a command. The hunters stopped moving. Then the Collector looked directly at a security camera, as if he knew Do-Hyun was watching. He raised one clawed hand and made a slow gesture. A promise, a threat. He was not going to run. He's coming for us, Yuna said. Do-Hyun nodded. I know, I'm counting on it. He had one more trap prepared. The biggest one. But it required the Veth to come to him, all of them together, in one place. The Collector was smart enough to see through the small traps. But maybe, just maybe, he was angry enough to walk into the big one. The game was almost over. One way or another, it would end soon. He had lost 16 hunters to the station's traps, 16 warriors, dead without even seeing their enemy. The remaining Veth followed him through the corridors with their weapons ready and their eyes scanning every shadow. They were scared, and that made them dangerous. Scared hunters made mistakes, but they also fought harder when cornered. The Collector had studied the footage the human had sent. He had watched his hunters die again and again, their deaths recorded and played back like a performance. The human was clever. The human understood systems and machines. But the human was still just one person, hiding somewhere in this maze of metal and dust. All the Collector had to do was find him. 3 levels below, Do-Yun watched the hunt on his screens and moved his pieces like a chess player. "They're heading for the reactor section," Yuna reported from her station. She had become his eyes, watching cameras while he controlled systems. Her ankle was heavily wrapped, but she ignored the pain. 12 of them left. "The Collector is keeping them close." "He learned from his mistakes," Do-Yun said. "No more splitting up, no more chasing false trails. He's going straight for the most important system on the station." "The reactor?" "He's thinking like an engineer now. Control the power, control the station. If he shuts down the reactor, all my traps go dark." Do-Hyun smiled slightly. "He's almost right, but I've already planned for this." The Collector's group reached the reactor section and began searching for access panels. They worked quickly, efficiently, their tools cutting through sealed doors with practiced ease. The Collector stood in the center of his group, directing them with sharp clicks and gestures. Do-Hyun let them work. Let them think they were making progress. Let them believe the reactor was their path to victory. Then he triggered the first trap. The lighting in the reactor section flashed from darkness to blinding white. The Veth staggered, their eyes overwhelmed by the sudden change. 3 of them opened fire reflexively, hitting nothing but walls and each other. 1 Veth went down from friendly fire. 11 left. The Collector roared a command, and his hunters recovered, forming a defensive circle. But Do-Hyun was already activating the next trap. Cooling vents opened in the floor, releasing clouds of freezing gas that dropped the temperature by 30 degrees in seconds. The Veth could survive cold, but they slowed down. Their movements became stiff, their reactions became sluggish. Do-Yun sealed 3 of them in a side room and flooded it with more coolant. They froze before they could cut their way out. 8 left. The Collector realized he was being herded. Every time he tried to advance, the station attacked. Every time he retreated, doors sealed behind him. The human was playing with him, pushing him in a direction he had not chosen. He made a decision. Instead of fighting the pressure, he would embrace it. "They're heading for the central hub," Yuna said, her voice tense. "All of them, moving fast." "I know." Do-Yun's fingers moved across his data pad. "That's where I want them. That's where our command center is. Was. I moved us to the backup control room an hour ago. The hub is empty except for automated systems running on loops." He looked up at her with those cold, determined eyes. "They think they're hunting us. They're actually walking into the final trap." The Veth reached the central hub and found it empty. Control stations flickered with activity, but no humans were present. The Collector made a frustrated sound and began smashing equipment, looking for hidden passages or concealed enemies. He would not find any. Do-Yun waited until all 8 remaining Veth were inside the hub. Then he sealed every door simultaneously. The lights went out, and the station's reactor pulsed with power it was never designed to produce. Do-Yun had spent hours modifying the reactor's emergency systems. The station's original builders had included a failsafe for containment breaches, a massive electromagnetic pulse that would neutralize dangerous equipment. Do-Yun had rewired it to target the upper levels of the station instead. The pulse swept through the hub like an invisible wave. Every piece of Veth technology died instantly. Weapons went dark. Armor systems shut down. The environmental controls in their helmets stopped working, and suddenly they could not breathe the station's thin air. On the security cameras, Do-hyun watched 7 Veth collapse, gasping and choking. They had maybe 2 minutes before brain damage set in, less before they lost consciousness. But the collector did not fall. The alien leader stood in the center of the chaos, surrounded by his dying hunters. His equipment still worked, still glowed with power. His helmet still fed him breathable air. He was shielded against EMP, protected by technology older and more reliable than anything his hunters carried. The collector looked at the nearest camera and made that slow gesture again. The promise. The threat. Then he began walking toward the maintenance section, toward Do-hyun. "He's still coming," Yuna said, her voice tight with fear. "I know." Do-hyun stood up from his station and picked up a length of metal pipe that he had found earlier. It was heavy and solid, a good weight in his hands. "Stay here. Watch the screens. If I don't come back in 20 minutes, take the Veth ship and go." "You can't fight him. He's bigger than you, stronger, trained for combat." "I know." Do-hyun walked toward the door. "But he's also alone, exhausted and very, very angry. Angry people make mistakes. And if he doesn't make a mistake?" Do-hyun paused at the door. He did not look back. "Then I'll make sure I take him with me." He stepped into the corridor and sealed the door behind him. The station was quiet now. No more clicking footsteps. No more hunting parties. Just Do-hyun and the collector, moving through the darkness toward a meeting that only one of them would survive. Do-hyun walked slowly, listening for any sound. His datapad still showed the collector's position, tracked by the few remaining cameras. The alien was 3 corridors away, moving carefully, checking every corner. 2 corridors. 1 corridor. Do-hyun stopped at a junction and waited. The metal pipe was cold in his hands. His heart was beating so hard he could feel it in his throat. The collector came around the corner and saw him. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. Human and Veth. Prey and hunter. 2 survivors of a battle that had killed everyone else. The collector made a sound that might have been a laugh. He raised his weapon, and Do-hyun activated his final trap. Not a station system this time. Just a simple chemical injector hidden in his sleeve, loaded with the compound Yuna had synthesized. He threw himself at the collector, not trying to fight, just trying to get close. The Veth was faster, stronger. He caught Do-hyun by the throat and slammed him against the wall. His grip was crushing. Stars exploded in Do-hyun's vision. But his hand found the collector's neck, and the injector found a gap in the armor. The Veth staggered. His grip loosened. The compound was working, disrupting his nervous system, making everything slow and confused. Do-hyun fell to the ground, gasping for air. He picked up the metal pipe. The collector tried to raise his weapon, but his arms would not obey. He tried to speak, but only clicking sounds came out. He looked at Do-hyun with something that might have been surprise. Do-hyun did not hesitate. When it was over, he sat against the wall for a long time, breathing hard and shaking. The metal pipe was slick in his hands. The collector's body lay still a few meters away. The station was silent. The hunt was finally over. Do-hyun closed his eyes and let himself rest, just for a moment. Then he got up and walked back to Yuna. There was still work to do. The Veth ship was waiting at the secondary docking port, silent and empty. Its crew was dead, scattered throughout the station in traps and corridors and sealed rooms. Only the ship remained, a dark, angular thing full of alien technology that no human had ever been meant to touch. Do-hyun stood at the airlock for a long moment, looking at it. He was covered in blood, some of it his own. His throat was bruised from where the collector had grabbed him. Every part of his body hurt in ways he could not even describe. But he was alive. Yuna caught up to him a minute later, limping heavily on her wrapped ankle. She looked at the ship, then at him, then back at the ship. "Can you fly it?" she asked. "I have no idea." Do-hyun stepped through the airlock and into the alien vessel. But I can learn. I always learn. The ship's interior was cramped and strange, designed for bodies that bent in different ways than human bodies. Control panels covered every surface, marked with symbols that meant nothing to Do-hyun. The air smelled wrong, chemical and bitter. Everything was built for Veth hands, Veth eyes, Veth minds. Do-hyun sat down at what looked like the main control station and began studying the systems. It took him 3 days to figure out the basics. Yuna spent those days treating their injuries and organizing the supplies they had found on the Veth ship. Food that tasted terrible but provided nutrition. Medical equipment that was surprisingly similar to Coalition designs. Weapons that she cleaned and stored just in case. On the second day, Do-hyun got the engines working. On the third day, he figured out the navigation system. On the fourth day, he managed to send a distress signal using a frequency that Coalition ships would recognize. They waited. Yuna sat in the command chair and watched the stars through the viewport. The station floated beside them, dark and silent, a tomb now for humans and Veth alike. She thought about the people who had died there, her crewmates, the hunters who had come to kill them. The strange species that had built the station 60 years ago and vanished into history. "Do you think about them?" she asked. "The ones we killed?" Do-hyun was working on a panel nearby, trying to understand the life support systems. He did not look up. "Sometimes." And I think they would have killed us without a second thought. They killed Jisoo and Hyun and Sujin just for being in the wrong place at the wrong time. He paused, his hands still on the controls. "I don't feel guilty. I feel tired, but not guilty." Yuna nodded slowly. "I keep thinking about the collector, the way he looked at me before you stopped him. He didn't see a person, just something to be dealt with. That's what we were to them. Resources to be sold or obstacles to be removed." Do-hyun finally looked up at her. "But they made a mistake. They thought we were helpless because we were soft and small and scared. They didn't understand that being scared just makes humans more dangerous." "Is that what you think? That we're dangerous?" "I think humans adapt. I think we solve problems. I think when someone tries to kill us, we find ways to kill them first." He went back to his work. The Veth forgot that, or maybe they never knew it in the first place. On the 6th day, the Coalition ships arrived. 3 vessels dropped out of faster-than-light travel and approached the station with weapons ready. They had picked up the distress signal and expected to find survivors, if anyone was alive at all. What they found was something different. The rescue commander was a woman named Cho Minji, a veteran of frontier conflicts who had seen more than her share of strange situations. But even she was not prepared for what Outpost Gamma 7 had become. She walked through the corridors with a security team, looking at collapsed sections and sealed doors and bodies frozen in airless rooms. She saw the traps that had been set up, the systems that had been rewired, the station's defensive grid that had been turned into a weapon. "2 people did all this?" she asked. Yuna was sitting in the Veth ship's command chair, drinking something that might have been coffee from the alien supplies. She looked exhausted but calm, wrapped in bandages and borrowed clothes. "He's an engineer," she said, nodding toward Do-hyun. "You give him a problem, he solves it. The Veth were just a problem." Commander Cho looked at Do-hyun. He was still studying the Veth ship's systems, making notes on a datapad, completely focused on his work. He looked like any other technician she had met in her career. Quiet, ordinary, the kind of person you would pass in a corridor without a second glance. But he had turned a dead station into a fortress. He had destroyed an entire Veth raiding party with nothing but tools and knowledge and the will to survive. He had done what soldiers with weapons and training might have failed to do. "What happens now?" Yuna asked. "Now we take you home." Commander Cho hesitated. There will be questions, reports, an investigation into what happened here and why your ship left you behind. We'll answer whatever you ask. Yuna glanced at Do-hyun again. We have nothing to hide. The commander nodded and turned to leave. At the door, she stopped. For what it's worth, I'm glad you survived. And I hope I never have to face whatever comes for someone who makes an enemy of an engineer. Yuna almost smiled at that. They left the station 3 hours later, aboard a coalition rescue vessel that was warm and bright and filled with people who spoke languages Do-hyun understood. The medical team treated their injuries properly. The food tasted like actual food. Someone gave them clean clothes and beds to sleep in. Do-hyun lay in his bunk and stared at the ceiling for a long time. He thought about the station, the traps, the Veth hunters dying one by one, the collector's face in the moment before the end. He had done terrible things to survive. He had killed more people in 1 week than most humans killed in their entire lives. He had used his skills, his knowledge, his understanding of systems and machines to end lives with cold efficiency. And he would do it again, if he had to. That was the truth he had learned about himself in the darkness of Outpost Gamma 7. He was not a killer by nature. He was not a soldier or a warrior. He was just an engineer who solved problems. But humans were adaptable creatures. When the problem was survival, the solution could be anything. Yuna came to his door later that night. She did not say anything, just sat down in a chair and looked out the viewport at the stars passing by. They sat together in silence for a long time, two survivors of something that would change them forever. What happens next? Do-hyun asked eventually. I don't know. Yuna leaned back in her chair. Go home, see my family. Try to remember what normal life feels like. Do you think we can? Go back to normal. She thought about it. No, not completely. But maybe that's okay. Maybe we're not supposed to forget what happened. Maybe we're supposed to carry it with us and let it make us stronger. Do-hyun nodded slowly. That felt right. Not comfortable, but right. Outside the viewport, the stars stretched on forever, cold and beautiful and full of dangers that humans were only beginning to understand. There were more stations out there, more threats, more problems waiting to be solved. And somewhere, in the darkness between worlds, other species were learning what the Veth had learned too late. Humans were small and soft, and seemed so fragile. But when you trapped one in a corner, when you threatened everything they cared about, when you gave them no choice but to fight or die, they became something else entirely, something dangerous. Something that would not stop until the problem was solved. Do-hyun closed his eyes and finally let himself sleep. Tomorrow there would be more questions, more reports, more explanations. But for now he could rest. He had earned it.